Hello, role-playing people, and in this episode of the podcast, we're continuing our Kupala Lore-Hunt. I'm going to sum up what we've previously read together from the 1997 Transylvania by Night book, and see how it compares to another source we've analyzed, the 1995 Tzimisce clan book. Quick note, something I feel the need to mention. The reason I've read through all of the relevant information in the Transylvania book on our previous episode was to show you, the listeners, how I collect my lore and how that information is spread throughout sidebars and different chapters. In future episodes, I will not quote the books as much. Instead, I will just sum up that information, and I hope, in light of what I've shown you, you will trust that I'm doing a good job and the information I'm providing is authentic. If I make mistakes, I will correct myself. Okay, that being out of the way, the 1997 book makes a couple of things clear if we also consider the other one. Shadow Lord's werewolves are indeed a presence in the old country, and as their conflict with the Tzimisce goes on, they are driven to retreat into the Transylvanian Alps, so the southern Carpathians. Some Dacians are kinfolk, as was the Dacian leader Decebal. Now, regarding Kupala, we get to see a different face of this entity. In the 1995 clan book, Lugor says that with Kupala's help, they will break their bonds, as if Kupala is somehow helpful or grateful to the Tzimisce and wants them to succeed in their task. In this book, however, we are clearly told this entity is a great demon, a plague upon the land. The voivodes themselves are, well, I won't say afraid of this entity, but they are careful. They avoid contact with this thing they don't know much about, which is unclean, evil even by their standards. The clan flaw of the Tzimisce is mentioned, and we are told that the dead Kupala-infested soil gives no nourishment to the fiends who rest within. Instead, it poisons their minds and bodies as well. Now, this is not outright mentioned here, but we did read about soul eaters in the clan book, and we can clearly see Kupala is a malevolent infector of all things in this book. So considering how twisted and disturbing the Tzimisce are in everything they do, especially old country fiends, especially metamorphosists, vicissitude, coldunism, and their almost desperate need to transcend their bond and this world, no matter the cost, as their elder wanted to. I'm getting a hint that Kupala definitely pulled the strings of this clan and corrupted them into vicious, taint-spreading monsters, as it corrupted their elder, their means, their minds, and their bodies too. Now, we also know Kupala cannot be killed because it took out its black heart and hid it somewhere deep within the bowels of the Carpathians, and this doesn't really make sense from the demon lore point of view, but we are told this is a twisted, maddened entity, so it does sound like an earthbound, but we cannot be sure. What we know for sure is it has minions known as Kupalas, and using those, it is spreading its unclean influence throughout Europe. As a matter of fact, the golem Makaba from the Jewish quarter in Prague is corrupted by Kupala, so the whole quest in Vampire the Masquerade Redemption is tied to this entity. Who else is Kupala working through? Well, the book says there are scattered Malkavian cults which do horrible things in worship of this demon, and it is at this point we are told that acts of cruelty feed Kupala. What is the Tzimisce clan known for? Well, you guessed it, cruelty. So this puts the whole corruption idea into a new light. Whenever a Tzimisce uses vicissitude on themselves or on someone else, they feed Kupala, so to speak, increasing the power of its spawn. Whenever they use coldunism to destroy the lands and command those elemental spirits into servitude, they do the same. They strengthen the taint. Werewolves are doing their best to combat the taint, but in doing so, they are healing the lands the Tzimisce so desperately need, so they are making the fiends stronger. Furthermore, the Tzimisce's madness and corruption grows more. as they indulge in cruel vicissitude and Koldunism. So, despite the fact that there is no mention of soul eaters here, we are clearly told the signature disciplines of the Tzimisce clan strengthen the demon and are akin to a disease. So the disease vicissitude, from my point of view, checks out. Worse still, Koldunism is in the same boat. In all of this, there are Cainites who actively want to fight Kupala, like the Malkavian Octavio, but the demon's influence is so strong they find themselves unable to do much to stop this thing from fully awakening. The fiends themselves fight the taint of this entity on Kupala's night, which is indeed a yearly ceremony. Reenacting an ancient rite, they all drink each other's blood from a cup, rend the veil between worlds, and fight the Kupala, removing their taint from the land, at least for a while. So it's interesting to see that what would later become the Sabbat Valdery is already an ancient rite to the Tzimisce. And though it is not explicitly said in the book, we can assume it does have some strengthening properties. I always thought Kupala taught the Clan of Dragons this rite during the Anarch Revolt, when Lugos found the Fire Flower, but it is much older than that. Though that doesn't necessarily mean Kupala isn't the one who taught them the rite initially. Muhahaha. We can assume, based on what we've read in the clan book 1995, that some tribes had already renounced Kupala during ancient times, sometime during the Roman invasion, so its worship, though still strong in the 12th century, is considerably weaker than it was. Kupala itself is lethargic. It's not fully awakened, so theoretically its influence should weaken even further into almost inexistent during the modern nights, unless the rituals on Kupala's night are a mock banishment and they still somehow nurtured this demon. But this is only an assumption. The lore is unclear in this regard. What we do know is that the Tzimisce clan flaw, while affected by Kupala's presence, isn't presented as a consequence of that presence, but we are instead told it's a mystical bond between ruler and land. Hopefully we'll get more info on this in future sources. So Shadow Lords are clearly a presence here, and it pains me that we cannot find anything on this matter in werewolf lore. Perhaps I didn't look hard enough, I don't know. I actually want to invite any fellow World of Darkness scholars and seekers of lore who might be listening to the podcast. Please assist in this regard and at least confirm that there is no werewolf source on Kupala. Any help in this regard would be greatly appreciated. Now, I would like to take a few minutes to explain why I think this book is really valuable to World of Darkness as a whole, and especially Vampire the Masquerade. At first glance, it's just a module, it's just a setting book for medieval Europe, which gives us a few hooks, shows us some characters, and dives into the current situation and some important Cainite locations. Yes. But it's not just fantasy. Certainly, it's mostly fantasy. It's alternative history with vampires, but it is also history to some extent. The writers were aware of this. The authors actually take the care to present their bibliography and inspirational sources at the very start of the book, along with a very mature and responsible note on historical accuracy. And the liberties they took while writing this material, in which they even point out some historical inaccuracies in their own setting and explain how they did this for dramatic storytelling reasons. Later on in the book, they take the time to talk about anachronisms in the same manner, and they actually invite the reader to check out their sources if they must, but for the most part, to just enjoy the story. Personally, I think this is a very mature approach to this type of game and the setting and, of course, the history this is based on. The inconsistencies are many, no doubt about that, but they don't bother much because the authors clearly state their intent. not to be absolutely historically accurate, but to tell a good story in a nice, dark, medieval setting, as opposed to the numerous other media, movies, books, even, supposedly educational media where the inaccuracies are abundant, but no one corrects them. It's really up to the historical community to address those inaccuracies, calling them out and making corrections. This does happen, so I'm happy about that. I think historical accuracy is something we need more of, as it doesn't really detract from the more fantastical elements and the stories, but actually enhances them. For taking the time to state their intention with this book, I congratulate the authors, and I love Dark Ages Vampire even more for this reason. But I'm getting off track. Let's get back to the book. What else is fun about the book? Well, the fact that a lot of the characters from Vampire the Masquerade Redemption can be found here. Joseph, Ardan, Ekaterina the Wise, Etrius, Prince Rudolf Brandl, the Cappadocian Garinol, and so on. It's such a trip down Golden Lane. I mean Memory Lane, and I'm probably going to replay both Redemption and Bloodlines after recording this. Yeah, most likely. Right, to conclude, I never thought I'd say Tzimisce and Tragic in the same sentence, but this Kupala entity clearly pulled the clan's strings without any shame and is actively corrupting the Transylvanian branch of the Fiends. At this point, I'm actually beginning to doubt a lot of the things I knew to be true about the clan, for you see, I'm beginning to doubt that the eldest, who wanted nothing but to transcend his condition, ascend to a new, higher form of existence, I doubt he would shackle himself to the Carpathians and become a monster, unless whatever deal he made with Kupala cost him dearly and eternally. But this is opinion, not fact, so we will see where our lore hunt takes us. I end this wadcast with a quick announcement. The lore hunt will continue with Transylvania Chronicles 1998, which is something I'm still studying at the moment, and thus it will not continue in the very next episode or even in the next few episodes. Some listeners have stated their interest in certain other topics they want me to explore, and because I do want to give back to the community, encourage dialogue, and I also think these are interesting topics, I will be taking a few steps in that direction. Nothing makes me happier than to know my podcast is both useful and enjoyable to you, role-playing people. So yeah, don't go too far, the Kupala lore hunt will continue. Take care, have fun, and don't forget to play.